live, yeah. I try to live my life patient.
First I need to say, hi Mom, how you doing? Okay, because she'll never forgive me, Rafik, if I don't say that. And the Quran say you got to mention your mother and your father.
And then get, hey David.
Okay.
We need to make our love priority.
I ain't well, really. See, I don't. If I catch my picture somewhere, I'll be down there at the thing.
That's why we say no more tears.
Okay.
No more kids. We gonna see what before they do the releases, we go anything out, I'm gonna see what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you got him on the picture in Mombasa there. You need to zoom in on that.
What I'm with
Ready?
you?
Come on, man, 'cause we got.
Oh, okay.
Try not to judge the people I meet.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Just tell us first off who you are.
Yeah, love conquers all. Love keeps us strong.
Like I said, I'm David Lewis, and I'm from East Palo Alto, California. That's probably about 30 miles from south of San Francisco. I grew up there, and like a lot of young men when they grew up in communities like that, as a result of poor management, what I attributed to and some bad decisions that I made, I wound up in prison here at San Quentin for about 17 years. I came to prison for selling $20 worth of heroin to an undercover narcotic agent and was sentenced from 10 to life, and came here 18 years old and kind of grew up here. In 1989, what I attribute to a couple significant emotional events that took place in my life. I was released from San Quentin and embarked on a new way of living. You know, it was a real schizophrenic type atmosphere. On one hand, in this community that I grew up in East Palo Alto, there was this huge push of Afrocentric education. And on the other hand, it was this huge push of poverty and crime and drugs and all that kind of stuff. And an individual growing up there, a lot of times they would go one side or the other. I was one of those individuals that gravitated to the side of the crime and the drugs and all of that kind of stuff. So probably around the time at the age of about 15, I was deeply involved in drugs, deeply involved in crime, and my whole day centered around the whole atmosphere of criminal activity.
Hi, I'm Carol Burton, Executive Director of Centerforce, and I met David in January of 2003. I was working in New York at the Osborne Association, and we wanted to bring in Breaking Barriers into Sing Sing Correctional Facility, and so I reached out to David.
My name is Chris Rich, also known as Stretch, and I was fortunate enough to meet David Lewis through my interaction as a facilitator for the pre-release class that used to exist here in San Quentin. And David used to come in and volunteer his time to try to help guys that were about to parole get themselves on the right track. A big core part of that pre-release class was breaking barriers, and I know that David helped develop that program with Gordon Graham. And I know that changed a lot of lives, and he was not only known in East Palo Alto and not only known in the state of California, but really throughout this country and throughout the world. And that's really an amazing thing.
My name is Lonnie Morris, and I came to know David Lewis actually from being incarcerated with him. In most of the 80s, we were here at San Quentin together. So I knew David Lewis when he was the person that David Lewis became. I knew him when he was, people call him Funky Rat, and he was a drug addict and a thug like myself and many others of the people that we associated with. It was interesting, in 1989, when they had the Lone Parade earthquake, me and David Lewis was actually standing in what's called the South Block Rotunda. And the building got to shaking, and we both ran out to the San Quentin Upper Yard. And we were both really kind of shook up because we thought that the air ducts over top of the building were going to fall down on us. And then we started reflecting on all the guys that were locked up in the cells because a lot of the officers ran out of the rotunda and out of the cell blocks and was standing on every yard with us. And you had all these guys locked in these cells. And we were talking about that, and I said to David, I said, you're supposed to be a tough guy, man, and they got you running scared to go back in the building because of the little earthquake. And I remember he said, yeah, but you can't stab an earthquake. And that was his sense of humor. But he also said, man, this made me never want to come back to prison because I don't ever want to be in a situation where somebody can run off and leave me locked in a cell, where somebody else could have that much control over my life that I couldn't do anything about it. And he used to always say that to me once he got out and started coming back to the prison. Dave would always tell me about how the experience of the Loma Prieta earthquake shaped his life and caused him to really think about turning his life around and not returning to a life of crime and drug addiction.
I'm Julie Lefshay, and I work for Centerforce. And I first met David Lewis through the Breaking Barriers training. He gave us a training for breaking barriers. But I had the opportunity to spend some time with him at his organization, Free at Last.
Who impacted upon your life in terms of an African American leader or figure that impacted upon your life in terms of making you think in broader terms of who you are and what is our history about?
I think for me it's kind of a cross between a whole lot of African Americans, and some of them are not recognized as leaders, but they're like leaders in my mind, people in my community. I had the opportunity the other day, I think it was Saturday, to go to a foundation, well, a charity organization in Menlo Park, California, East Menlo Park, California. And these people had donated my organization some money. And most of the time, I go to those kind of things, luncheons, and for people that has donated money, and it's like some other people, foundation people, real foundation people that's known. And these people were simple African-American people that lived right there in the community, that had heard about the work that we was doing, and they wanted to contribute. It was a real, well, a minimal amount of money. But those are the heroes in my life. One of the heroes that I have in my life, I remember being in, I think, Chino down in Palm Hall, and having a book, I'm the Greatest, Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, I remember that book.
And I was a young person, I was only like 20 years old or something, and I read that book, and it was like, that put so much fight in me, you know, to be able to proceed in doing what I was doing. Of course, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and those people, but for me, there's a lot of heroes, African Americans, that don't get the credit. You know, Lonnie, you one of my heroes, man. You know, really. Yeah, I mean, you are one of my heroes. I come to this prison and I see you with the energy and doing the things that you do, and it's like, man, you know, I look at that and I marvel at it, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of African American heroes in my life that, you know, they don't get the recognition, you know, like some of the other ones, like Martin Luther King and all that stuff. But and I recognize them. I try to stay conscious of them on a daily basis. What would this person do in that situation, or what did that person do in that situation? And I step up on the pedestal and regain what I need to.
My name is Kenyatta, and I first met David Lewis at No More Tears, and I became more familiar with him through the Breaking Barriers videos and seeing him occasionally coming through San Quentin. And as I worked in the pre-release class, David used to come over there and speak sometimes to the pre-release students and talk about breaking barriers. And I met him through that process there. And he immediately made an impact on me just because, number one, I knew that he had done time here at San Quentin, and number two, that he had got out and he changed his life around. And went back to his community and actually took the principles that he learned through Breaking Barriers and other positive programs, and not only changed his life around, but helped change his community around as well.
My name is Gwen Jones, and I'm the founder and executive director of Yeshua's Second Chance Foundation. I met David Lewis when I first started coming to San Quentin at the age of 14 years old. And when I met David, he was young and had a huge afro, and he had an attitude about me coming in. He listened to my presentation, and afterwards he said, "What are you doing in here?" He said, "I can look at you and tell you never drank nothing, you never smoked nothing, and you haven't been out in the street, so why are you coming in here?" I said, "I came to tell you that you can't be too bad for Jesus, and that God loves you. You can turn your life around."
My name is Troy Williams. I actually met David Lewis at another penitentiary when he came in and talked about Breaking Barriers program. And I thought it was pretty impressive for a man to have been in the penitentiary to be coming back in trying to give those of us still there some good news about how to change our lives around and stay out the pen once we get out.
My name is Jonathan Wilson. My friends call me JW. I'm from East Palo Alto, and I knew David through my sister, Sharifa Wilson, who used to be the mayor of East Palo Alto. I met David about 1992, and David was, at that time, the president of Free at Last. And my sister wanted me to go over to David to try to connect with the community, to try to connect, so just keep me, more or less, to keep me out of the street. And I would always see David, he'd always see me doing what I'm doing, running around. He would always tell me, "When you gonna come to Free at Last, John? When you gonna come to Free at Last?" And so that was when I first met David.
When will the violence cease? Fill the world with love. Love will bring us peace.
I was featured in a Bill Moyers documentary a couple years after I got out. And the warden that was here at San Quentin saw it on television and contacted me and asked me would I come here and talk to some folks, you know, some folks that he knew that I knew. And I came here to San Quentin and I started doing that, and you see, people kind of thought that, okay, I was coming in here giving up all of this wonderful information, but mind you, I had only been out like 2 years, so I was really still struggling. And I really believe that one of the reasons why I came here was to be able to continue with my rehabilitation, because I needed something to constantly see as a reminder. Then they had folks like Lonnie and several other members of No More Tears, the organization No More Tears here, was here to kind of like reinforce what I was doing. I had the opportunity to build a fairly large and expensive rehabilitation program in our community, and it's known worldwide at this particular point. So I always get the questions of like, how did this start? Well, really, it started here.
Hi, my name is Vernell Crittenden. I am a correctional lieutenant at San Quentin State Prison, retired in 2006. I wanted to spend a few moments with you today just to talk a little about David Lewis, a man that I began working relationship with in 1993. David Lewis used each of his challenges as a stepping stone to help others reach a successful life. He would use himself as that example that it can be done and you can do it. He would often say, "Don't take nothing." And that was his words. And he lived by those words. But more importantly, I think that one of the things the men behind the walls of San Quentin knew about David Lewis is that they weren't going to be conned. They could look into the heart of that man and know that the words that he was speaking weren't just words, but it was a passion, it was a belief, that David believed that they could be more, just as he became more through his efforts.
My name is Daniel Trevino, and I met David Lewis about 5 years ago as I was working as a Native American clerk. I was introduced to him by Chaplain Rafik Hassan. When I met David, I could see right away, he was a very compassionate individual, cared a lot for his fellow human beings. We talked, and eventually I told him why I was here, and he was interested and told me that he was working with youngsters in YA, and then my story might help some of those youngsters.
I'm Laura Bowman Salceder, and I first met David when I was a bridging instructor here at San Quentin. David was invited to come and address the bridging instructors and the education staff, and that was after I was only here for probably 6 or 9 months, and I was new to San Quentin and new to working with the incarcerated population. And this giant of a man walked in the room. He was introduced as a guest speaker, a very special guest speaker. I didn't know his background, and when he started to speak, it was evident that this was a man that had experience and a story. And when he shared what his story was about having been a former consumer of corrections and San Quentin, and then talked about his time here, I was hooked. And the most vivid thing that I took away from that first meeting was his availability, his presence, and him as a being.
Well, David, he came from the same streets that I came from. That's what the sense that I got from him. He wasn't faking. He wasn't one of these guys that learned all this stuff in college and then just came down here to speak about it. David came from the streets. And so this came from him. It was genuine, So the impact that he had on me was one that came from that, basically. I knew that he came from the same streets that I came from, basically, and he had changed his life around. Something that I want to do, something that I'm working on doing now. And he had an impact on my life because speaking with him at No More Tears, speaking with him in this pre-release class that I was involved in, and seeing him on these Breaking Barriers tapes and talking about the principles for change, these are things that I've incorporated into my life right now.
Ed said that he was perfect, and now I don't know about all of the aspects of being perfect because I know I've done some wrong things. But there's 3 things that I do really good on a daily basis. I don't use drugs, right? I don't use drugs. I don't use alcohol. I don't commit crimes on a daily basis. And I use the strength and the energy of Malcolm looking out that window with that gun, and my mind is my AK-47 to say, you know what? No matter what, I don't do those things. And the 4th thing that I do, I try to help somebody every day.
From sunup to sundown, he was always working. And David didn't make any distinctions between work and play. He left that up to us to kind of figure out whether he was working or playing. He always seemed to have a nice time. So what I wanted for him was balance. And 2 years ago, I gave it up because I realized that he was having a ball doing what he was doing. And there was, the choices the choice he made for himself was to live a life that was full of giving and giving and giving and giving. And as a result, he received, and he would say that, he had very few regrets in life.
David was real. Of course, I didn't know him while he was incarcerated, but I knew him to be somebody that what you saw was what you got. There was nothing phony about the man. And to me, that encompasses all the qualities that to me are special about him. If he said something, he meant it. And if he said something, he was going to follow through on it. And that's another thing I've come to learn that's really important. And one of the things that makes him most unique to me among all the other people out there that are working on reentry, that are working on advocacy, that are working on rehabilitation, is that he had a way of cutting through the crap. and just get to the heart of what needed to be done and help others do the same thing.
David kept it real all the time. And, you know, he had walked in the shoes, you know, they say don't judge a person until you've walked in their shoes, you know that phrase? He had walked in the shoes of a lot of people, you know. He had walked in the shoes of an addict. He had walked in the shoes of someone who was down for a long period of time, who didn't know whether they were going to get out. He had been in the life, and he walked the streets of East Palo Alto on a daily basis, and he still came into prisons all over the world and tried to just tell his story and try to help people change. And so he was just real. He was real and he was honest.
You know, it's a lot of different things a person can do just to go make money, just to go be out there. But I knew that with David Lewis that he had changed his life, that it wasn't even a question as to, you know, if this guy was going to come back to the penitentiary or something like that. That wasn't even a question in the minds of, I think, many people who knew him. I know it wasn't a question in my mind, and that's something that I think we all admire.
One of the situations where No More Tears kind of birthed out of, it's like it starts to become a real significant emotional impact, the impact that it has on you when you get as old as me and Lonnie and you start to see our kids and grandkids and all that kind of stuff start coming through here. And it's like you think cognitively, it's like, what have I done to really... I heard a guy talking about our ancestors one day, right here in San Quentin. That man, the older people, the ancestors, they don't do this, they didn't do that. And the guy asked, he said, well, what kind of ancestor are you going to make? Even in my insanity, that had an impact on me. So being able to become an ancestor that people could look at and say, oh, it's a positive influence in the world and all that kind of stuff was really, it's still a huge goal of mine.
My name is Mitch, and I met David like 4 years ago at a No More Tears banquet. He had dedicated not only his time, but had contributed a lot of funds to making the actual event happen. It's like a reoccurring nightmare, man. 2 years ago, I lost a friend named Bobby. I was looking at the news, I was doing my homework, and I had my headphones on. This incident right here with David, it was the same kind of situation. I was sitting on my bunk, and something grabbed me about an incident what they were talking about at the mall in San Mateo. When I found out through another friend who it was, it really devastated me. I mean, I would have bet all the money in the world that he had escaped this lifestyle. I mean, this drama that had happened. So for me, it's really like a nightmare. The days is changing, but the theme is the same. And it really devastated me to hear about his death. And I'm just really shocked by it right now.
I received a phone call at 6:47 on that horrid day. Some of the men on the streets who had been incarcerated that know me called and said, Miss J, they got David. And I said, what do you mean they got David? You mean that somebody has arrested David Lewis? And he said, no, David is dead. And I screamed. I said, that can't be. I just talked with him. I said, where, why, who, what? And they said, we don't know yet, but we'll let you know as we find out. I haven't been able to sleep for the last 3 days. And I've been absolutely shaking from the stress of losing a person who was my hero, because he was a walking, living being who had turned his life around. He was doing what I tell other men and women that they can do. I have yet to adjust to not having the presence of David Lewis in my life and the work that we both did.
When I heard about David Lewis's murder, I heard it on the news. I was in my cell and I heard the news Wednesday night on June the 9th, and they said that a man had been shot and killed in the mall in San Mateo. And they didn't mention any name. At that time, they didn't say the person's name. So I just kind of dismissed it as, man, another tragic death. You know, so much on the news was about death and destruction until I remember I turned the channel and didn't think anything of it. The next morning, one of the Muslim brothers named Goldie came to me and said, man, you know the person who got killed in that mall was David Lewis. And I said, man, you crazy. That wasn't no David Lewis. David Lewis ain't dead. I just saw David Lewis a couple months ago. And he said, man, it was David Lewis. They had about how he was a community leader. They showed his organization, the building of his organization, Free at Last. He said, brother, I'm sorry, but I'm telling you it was David Lewis. And I really didn't want to hear it. I said, man, go on with that, man. I'm not trying to hear that. It wasn't no David Lewis. And after he left, I just kind of sit there in my cell and tried to deny it. I tried to tell myself that Goldie was tripping, that he had made a mistake and that it couldn't be David Lewis because, you know, David Lewis couldn't be killed like that. We had survived too much. We came through too much violence to be 19 years after he's been out of prison to be gunned down by somebody. So it just didn't register with me. And then I went and began washing up, and I was suddenly overwhelmed with the reality of it, and I started crying. And I tried to hold back the tears because I didn't, you know, we were tough guys, and excuse me, I got to stop. Yes.
It was Wednesday night, the night that he was killed. We were finishing up a board retreat kickoff dinner in Oakland at Yoshi's. And the board members were kind of filing out one at a time. And then one of my board members, Joan, came running in saying, she was running, it felt like slow motion. And she finally got close enough and she sat down in front of me and she said, Carol, David has been shot and killed. And I said, oh, not my David. And she said, yeah, David Lewis. I got a call from the police chief's office in East Palo Alto. It is David. And I said, no, not David. I said, that couldn't be real. And then as she is assuring me that it is real, and I say to her, can you call back and make sure? And she does it just for my benefit. And at that point, I was in disbelief. I was thinking, who would do such a thing? Who would take out a person who gave so much? Who would, you know, I called him my David, but everybody called him their David. You know, who would do that? And
I can understand a person's rage and a person being mad, but when you look at David Lewis, you didn't just kill David Lewis. You may have killed the hope for thousands of other people. And that's what really, you know, is selfish of the person who actually did it.
To this day, I'm still a little numb. I feel kind of out of sorts. To this day, I really can't believe it.
He was one of those guys that made it, and not only made it, and when I say made it, I mean he didn't get reincarcerated, but he did so much more than that. He changed the culture in his community. He created a whole organization to help people. He created a whole reentry program. I mean, he was changing lives on a daily basis just from the things that he touched. And those things are going to live on. But what he could have, excuse me. What he could have done, you know, we lost it.
David Lewis will be missed. But the way that his work has to go on, and that has to go on in each and every one of us.
To work out things that bother me. Whenever we think to selfishly.
I can't finish it, man. I thought I was cool though. I'm not.
They need to hear from you.
I've tried, man, but I don't know.
Brushing aside negativity and trying not to judge the people I meet. Always live by love's philosophy. Yeah.
It's just the thing that makes it so hard is that David was so full of life, and he brought so much to life. He was a person who he could laugh with the best of them, man. He had a sense of humor that was out of this world. He always found the laughter in a situation, no matter how difficult or how bad it was. It was one of the things that allows us to survive all the things we've been through in life. Was his ability to see the human in it, and to see that nothing was ever going to be as bad as it looked, and that there was always a sunny side to the situation. That there was he had an eternal optimism about his life and about life in general, and that was contagious. It made you believe that you could overcome things that didn't seem like you could overcome, things that appeared to be insurmountable. His mental fortitude and his just tenacity about life was something that said, there's nothing that you can't do, man. There's no obstacle that is too big or challenge too daunting. He gave me that sense of belief that if David could do it, I could too.
See, somebody planted a seed in me years ago, and every now and then somebody came along and put some water on it, and this is the results of it.
Make sure to work out things.
David Lewis named his organization by what he's experiencing right now. David Lewis is free at last.
Priority, yeah. Love conquers all. Love keeps us strong. Love conquers all. We got to keep holding on. Try to live my life peacefully while brushing aside negativity. And try not to judge the people I meet. We always live by love's philosophy. Yeah, love conquers all. Love keeps us strong. Yes, it does. Love conquers all. Love conquers hate. Yes, it does. Love conquers all. Love creates life. Yeah. Love conquers all. Love conquers all. You're asking me what will the violence cease? Love and love will bring us peace. You're asking me what will there be peace? Fill your heart with love and peace will never cease.